pick and roll with it. Make a pick and roll with it. Betting weekly. Fast break from coast to coast and way downtown. From coast to coast and way downtown. From coast to coast and way downtown.
Welcome into a Thursday edition of Betting Weekly Fast Break. I'm Doug Kezirian alongside professional handicapper Wes Reynolds, and we have a ton to get through as this is the final Fast Break show for the holiday week. We will have a Betting Weekly Hardball show tomorrow, discuss some baseball. We'll be doing that with Adam the Bull, so make sure you check that out on a busy holiday. That is July 4th. But we are talking hoops today. We're going to get into the NBA in a little bit, but we have five games in the W to break down after a mid-season break, so to speak. But I also want to remind you to make sure you like and subscribe. That is the currency in the YouTube world. It's free for you to do, and it really helps us out. So please do that for the Bet Rivers Network. Obviously, some great content on here, especially with Wimbledon going on. Nigel and the crew do a wonderful job breaking that down. They also do it on the newsletter, so we want you to sign up for that. That's bettingweeklystudios.com. We're talking 30-plus pages. Bet Rivers odds everywhere, links to this show and all the others, soccer previews, tennis previews, and Wimbledon occurring right now. So, Wes, I talked about a lot of traffic, as we like to call in the business, but how are you on this Thursday?
Doing well, Doug, as we approach the 4th of July holiday weekend. Nice to have a good slate of basketball tonight and a good slate of baseball for that matter. So looking forward to breaking down the games.
Yeah, we've seen some line movement over the last couple of days. Obviously, the Tuesday game of the Commissioner's Cup, because it's unknown at the beginning of the season. So all the teams had to have that day off or those couple of days off in case they got that far. Although we could have told them beginning of the season which teams were not going to be in the mix. We should have had a toilet bowl, so to speak. We should have that in the NBA too. Have the two worst teams play as well. Let's get some other games going on for some action. But unfortunately, we didn't have that. So it's been a few days off with the W. We have 5 games, and we'll get into the NBA. Obviously, there's been some big news this week, but nothing in the last, 19, 20 hours. So we will get to the NBA in a little bit. But I want to start in the W, and the biggest game with the biggest line movement so far. And it makes a lot of sense. Albert Nguyen was on the show with Sarah yesterday and had a great analysis. He jumped on the Aces -1.5, and I think a lot of other people did too, because now they're 4.5-point road favorites over the Fever, fresh off an impressive win against the Lynx. You and I both were on the wrong side there. Although, no, sorry, I did the show with Albert and that. And we were both on the wrong side, so we took an L there. But you're on fire right now. You're doing well, coming off some baseball. 7-3 in your last few shows. 1-0 yesterday. How are you seeing this Aces game as road chalk over what we think will be a flat Fever team?
Yeah, I think this is the right side. I'm a little late to the party here on 4.5. If you made me bet it, I would still lay it with the road favorite here. But not only the flat spot for the Fever, and by the way, I think second half of the season that at least is maybe, I don't want to say a buy sign like in the futures market, but not getting a bargain price with the NBA's most polarizing team clearly, but. I do think that they found something like the defense. That's what I'm wanting to see is this defense going to carry over? Because the defense against the Lynx I thought was outstanding in that Commissioner's Cup final. And we knew it was going to be probably lower scoring because, that game matters a little bit more, even though it doesn't count in the standings necessarily. But $500,000, the winning team on the line. So the defense, I thought it was a grinder game, and that's what it turned to. And, am I thinking, can the Fever really play this grinder style? Because we know that with Caitlin, they've wanted to play this fast pace, right? Get up and down the floor, get in transition as much as you can. There's a reason why she gets picked up 94 feet is because if you give her that rebound and all of a sudden the defense is not back, she's going to go. And you're seeing the Fever. I don't know if they necessarily played slower, but they played much better defense. So that's got to give this team a little bit of confidence. And I think it's bringing them together. Maybe some of the scrutiny that they're getting. We heard some of the comments after the game on one of the players. I think it was Sid Colson's IG, like, oh, the league's got to be so mad. And Aaliyah Boston's like, yeah, they're pissed because the Fever are kind of like the NWO of the WNBA right now, where they're seen by the other teams as the bad girls or the bad team. And yet the fans cheer for him. The every game is a home game sweatshirt that you saw Caitlin wear on the bench when she was out a couple weeks ago. So there probably is a little bit of resentment and some jealousy from the rest of the league. But nevertheless, back to the game. This is interesting here because the Aces, who have been a disappointment this year, they come off probably their best win in the season. I thought that was their best win to win that at the end at Phoenix, who have been red hot this year, and we'll get to them later. And now you're going to Indiana, a team that you came back on in the second half. I know Caitlin had 19 and 10 in the first meeting there at the T-Mobile a couple weeks ago, but she didn't have her best game. She clearly wasn't 100% either. And the Aces were able to pull away in that fourth quarter. Now they come on the road with a little bit of confidence. They also add Nalissa Smith. That's an interesting angle here, too. I don't know how many minutes she's going to play. She's only been with the club a couple of days. She was traded from Dallas a couple days ago, where the Aces gave up a first-round pick, too, for next year. So they paid a pretty high premium here. Nalissa Smith, everybody remembers, was on the Fever last year, and then she was dealt in the offseason in that multi-team trade that got Sabali and Thomas to Phoenix, Sophie Cunningham to the Fever. So multiple team trade. So, probably some motivation to come back and want to beat your old team that traded you in the offseason. So I think that the Aces are the right side. I'm having trouble laying 4.5 when you could have laid a much better number earlier. And I don't know yet how much I can buy into this Fever defensive resurgence, because we saw it one time in the Commissioner's Cup. Is that going to be a trend, or was that an aberration? So staying out of this one for now.
Okay, so let's back it up a little bit. Is Caitlin Clark definitely out?
She is.
Okay, because I'm checking. I haven't seen official word. The point spread suggests that. I thought that would be the case, but okay, so I'm seeing it now. Okay, because I wasn't sure if it was 100% ruled in, and that was the case. Okay.
Yeah, I am double checking though, just to make sure.
It was announced yesterday.
Yeah, I
just
saw the
wanted to
tweet.
make sure.
Yeah,
I just wanted to make sure it was official. Okay, so the Aces have been steamed up a little bit, and a lot of it is just sort of the natural common sense. Like, they're celebrating, they're off a high. Each player won $30K for the win instead of $10K for the loss, and they're feeling themselves. And it's a natural flat spot. But at some point, the point spread will adjust. Like, if it was Fever plus 15, we would take Indy. If it was Fever plus 10, we would take Indy. So at some point, the line is too high. And like you said, you're just uneasy. You think it's still the right side, but you're a little uneasy. Each of the past 2 years, the Lynx won last year, beat the Liberty, cashed the $30K. They went and lost the next game 2 days later as a 9.5-point favorite. They lost to the lowly Dallas Wings. 2 years ago, the Aces were won, and then they lost outright the next game. 3 years ago, the team that was favored by 5.5 lost by double digits. Or sorry, they were underdogs by 5.5, lost by double digits. So situationally, the last few years, it's been a horrendous spot. Okay, I mean, keep in mind the players won more in this game than they do for winning the championship, bonuses wise. Ari McDonald, doubled her salary or whatever, like some ridiculous amount.
Who's been, by the way, a nice addition for the Fever, by the way. I think that's a sneaky good signing that they made.
And I said it when she was a free agent. I said all these teams are stupid, and they are. What you need at the point guard position is a fast point guard, an athletic, quick point guard. You can break down a lot of horrible defenders. And so trying to run the offense through Sophie Cunningham was laughable. It just shows you Stephanie White's cluelessness at times, when she tried to do that the game Sydney Colson got hurt. Sidebar, sorry. I laid the points against the Sun in that game. So I just think it's a really, really bad spot. And I don't think there's true power ratings for a situation like this, right? sometimes the spot is so like I'll give you any number right at some point. So like I would bet this still at 4.5. So I'm going to make it an official play. I think the line is high unnecessarily, but I still think it's the right side to your point. So I'm laying the 4.5 as a regular play. Obviously, I love money line, things like that. I looked at the Lynx last year. They were actually stormed out of the gates off the win, double-digit lead, and then they collapsed in the second half. So it's like they ran out of energy. So usually I'd be trying to get cute and think first quarter, but I'm not here. I'm just going to play the Aces minus 4.5. They obviously are coming off a big win themselves, but I think they need to kind of catapult that in a big road trip. So they won in Phoenix on Sunday, came home, obviously, because it's several days. But now they have 4 more road games. So this is a big stretch for Vegas, which is around 500, cusp of making the playoffs. They lost Asia Wilson for a few games with a concussion. I don't think they can afford to mess around. I think some of the role players, the bench players, are playing better. I think Becky Hammond's got him on a string a little bit, and it was a nice win in Phoenix. I think they're coming into Indy, and I think they're going to take care of business.
And the Fever, by the way, you mentioned the Aces starting a road trip. The Fever are starting a homestand. This is the first of 5 games because All-Star game is in Indianapolis this year. They're already making the preparations for that. So you've got all these home games before the All-Star game. This is kind of the toughie now. I think you have some winnable games after that for the Fever. The Sparks there on Saturday, Golden State, and kind of a payback game. They lost out there a couple weeks ago. The Atlanta Dream, Dallas Wings. Chance for the Fever, I think, to get right here on this homestand. Both these teams, by the way, are 8-8 right now. Have been big disappointments, and I think everybody would have power rated them top 4, along with the Liberty and the Lynx going into the season. They're not in the top 4 probably right now, and the Fever especially have been uneven with Caitlin being out so many games. So it'd be Aces or pass for me.
Okay, so no official play. You think the line's gotten too high? You don't want to get involved.
I think the line's right. I don't know if it's necessarily too high. I think, if it got a little bit higher, it would at least pique interest in the Fever. But this is such a bad spot for Indiana here. And, the celebration, obviously, that's a sense of accomplishment. And that's the first real sense of accomplishment for this group because they didn't make the playoffs last year. And, obviously expectations are high with every game is a home game. And now, and there was a lot of expectations for this team that they haven't met as of yet. I do think the homestand they could get right here. I don't know if it's tonight, though.
Okay. So because I mean, look, I'm dissecting this game because this is a classic awful spot. Last year, like I said, the Lynx lost outright as a 9.5 point favorite. The previous couple of years, they didn't come. So the math guys and the market and all that, they'll take a number in the Fever. So maybe this comes down at some point. I have to play the Aces. I think the line is not right, so I will still play it. The other team involved in that Commissioner's Cup championship game, the Lynx, they are 11.5 point home favorites to the Mystics, who've been pretty competent and flirting with a playoff spot. So it's a big number. There's a tax. I'm always careful here. Everyone sort of conventional wisdom, old Doug, as I like to say, who doesn't have as many have as much scar tissue, would say, "Oh, Lynx are going to kill them. They're going to be all upset." I do think that's the case. But I also think they're deflated and exhausted. And I wouldn't jump to lay the 11.5. I think this is a big number. And I said this the other day with Minnesota. I think Nafisa Collier is excellent and a rightful MVP favorite. But the pieces around her, I think it's more the system and the coaching and the execution and defense than it is the players. Like if you had a pickup game of the Lynx and Mystics, Collier would definitely be the first player taken. But I wonder how many Mystics players would be taken before McBride or Courtney Williams. But there's a drop off. I mean, Shepard's good and Alana Smith and stuff, but really it's how all the pieces fit. So when things aren't going well, like Tuesday night from the second quarter on, or the officiating swallowing the whistle because it's a big game and the stakes are high, this is not a team that I think it just can will themselves to win and with talent and everything. Now, granted, they're really good. They're still a title contender, but there's lacking of talent. So if shots aren't falling or something's a little off, they can snowball. And we saw that in the second quarter on Tuesday.
Yeah, absolutely. And their offense just got out of whack. I think it was part on their fault, and part the Fever played really good defense and really rebounded well. So when I talk about rebounding, if I'm looking to target a player for the Mystics on a prop, I have not played this, but maybe Shakira Austin over rebounds, because one of the stories in Mystics camp have been that there's rumors that they're trying to move the second year player Aaliyah Edwards, the former UConn player who was a high first round pick. And, now Shakira Austin's getting a lot of that clock here. Emily Inkster, we'll see if she's going to be back or not. I don't think she's been ruled back in. I think still listed as questionable, but the Lynx had real trouble rebounding in that Commissioner's Cup on Tuesday
They're
night.
one of the worst in the league. Last year,
Yeah.
they were dead last.
Yeah, and Natasha Howard, Flash had 12. Aaliyah Boston had 11. So Shakira Boston at 7.5 rebounds, I think, makes a lot of sense off a down game too, where she had 18 points, but only had 3 rebounds against the Wings. But the Wings actually aren't a bad rebounding team. But she had 13 before that against the Aces, had 8 against the Lynx in the previous meeting on June 24th, had 7 against the Wings, had 10 against Atlanta. So that might be a prop I think worth looking at, is Shakira Austin over rebounds, just because she's getting more minutes now. New coach Sydney Johnson, I think, has shown a little bit more faith in her than Aaliyah Edwards, which is the reason why Aaliyah is at least rumored to be on the trading block. We shall see. But yeah, there's been some trades made. We talked about the Melissa Smith to the Aces. Been some movement with some of these teams, certainly. And plus you're starting to get players come back from international obligations. One I didn't mention for the Fever, Damiris Dantas, their backup big, is still playing for Brazil in international competition. So some of these teams are getting players back, and some of them are still without some in the rotations.
So I like that Austin look. I think the prop is right, but she's starting now where she wasn't before. She's playing about 28 to 30 minutes. Suggs Sutton, I think, is a game time decision, although she's a guard, but just something to keep in mind. Austin's a beast on the board. She's a little bit of a black hole offensively. I think she's really good when she's right. I think she can eat rebounds for sure. So over 7.5 would be the only way I would play it. I think the juice with Bet Rivers at minus 134 has me off. But do you want to make it an official play or anything?
What is the juice now at Bet Rivers?
134.
Okay. I'll leave it as a lean for now.
Okay. Yeah, we'll come back to it too. You always got that option. So anything on the side or total, I would lean Mystics like a first quarter or something like that. I think the Lynx maybe now it's also a revenge card. The Lynx lost in DC recently when they last played. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, so I think it's probably right. I don't necessarily want to just jump in on the Lynx thinking, okay, off a bad game, buy low here, because the Mystics have been scrappy. So
they're competent and they're well coached.
Yeah. So this is going to be a stay away on side and total for me.
Yeah, I lean Mystics first quarter. I think it's a little hangover effect before the Lynx get going, and they really are strong in second quarters because they have a good sort of second unit and system. But the Mystics actually have some depth too. Interesting game in Atlanta. Ryan Howard officially ruled out for the Dream. So the Storm have moved to a road favorite, got up to 1.5. It's now settled at 1. Over under 158.5. That's down a couple points. Dream, pretty solid at home. They have like a nice home court, and Alicia Gray's been fantastic this year. But Storm road chalk. Seattle's been a tricky team for me. They're kind of a mixed bag. They can beat any team and they can lose to any team on any given day. So I'm passing here. Although in the chat section, we have Petey saying, "Stay away from me," talking about the previous game, but he's on the Dream tonight. So and we encourage everyone to get involved in the conversation. What about you, Wes? Petey's on the Dream, home dog. Without Ryan Howard, how about yourself?
Yeah, nothing on the side or the total for me, but I will look for a player here. And one of the stories that we heard come out earlier this week, of course, the All-Star starters did get named, and one of those that was not named a starting guard was Skylar Diggins for the Seattle Storm, who's averaging about 19 a game this year, 17.5 on the prop tonight. I still think even without Ryan Howard, the Dream, they play the single coverage. They allow a lot in the pick and roll, and that's what Skylar, I think, is best at. She's also pretty good in the mid-range, can be a little streaky from the three, but in terms of fast break, she goes to the rim and can get to the foul line. The Dream have had trouble against some opposing guards. We saw, I think, Natasha Cloud earlier in the game had 20 against them. Courtney Vandersloot, before she's now been lost for the season, had 16. Arike Ogunbowale had 21 with no threes. Ariel Atkins, 29 when they played the Sky. Brittany Sykes had a couple 20-point games against the Dream. Sabrina Ionescu had 34 in the game against the Liberty earlier this year. So I think it's there for Skylar Diggins to have a pretty big game and maybe motivated too, because it's like, okay, I wasn't voted by – because there's a mix of like fan voting, media voting, and player voting. So you've seen discrepancy. That's been a big topic of discussion with some of these players. And Skylar Diggins was not listed as one of the top four. She's going to be a WNBA All-Star and play in the All-Star game, but wasn't a starter. So sometimes players have that little extra motivation that next time out. And we see it in other sports too. We see it in the NBA, especially guys that maybe are the snubs. They sometimes have really big games that first game after the All-Star teams are announced. So I could see that happening here for Seattle tonight. So Skylar Diggins over 17.5.
Okay, so you want to make that an official play or just a lean?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to make it official.
Okay, I like it. And worth mentioning that the Storm just got beat down on their last game on Sunday, lost by 20-something at Golden State. Really embarrassing performance. But this is their first meeting of the year. You mentioned that they have trouble defending certain things. So Diggins over 17.5, minus 127. Little juicy, but, it's an option. And Diggins is a smooth player, and she's very fundamentally sound. I could see her getting there, and the Dream want to push. So that's a play for Wes. Liberty hosting the Sparks. I think the Sparks team stinks. Liberty still without Jonquel Jones. Have been in a little bit of a rut coming back from a road trip where they had a couple losses. They're favored by 10 and over under 170.5. Albert Nguyen was on the show. He has the Liberty first half -6 from yesterday's show when he was discussing this game. Do you have an opinion here? I think the Liberty blow them out, but I'm a little gun shy. They're missing Phoebish. They're missing Jonquel Jones. Sparks, I just don't think are very good at all.
Yeah, I think new system here with Lynn Roberts, the former Utah coach. They're wanting to run a little bit, much like we talked about with Carl Semesco down there in Atlanta. A little bit more success down in Atlanta, certainly, than there's been in Los Angeles here. I don't really like this Sparks team either. Liberty are still a little bit shorthanded without Phoebich, and of course you mentioned Jonquel Jones. So I think this is probably about right here. Ray Burrell, by the way, looks like she is going to come back for the Sparks tonight. I think she's only played one game, so that gives them at least a depth piece and another player. This team can score a lot of points, but they can't guard. I was not impressed with a spot that you would think that they could win against another team that's struggling. The Chicago Sky really handled them, I thought, in the second half on Sunday. And yeah, they've got a bunch of big scores, but the defense just isn't there. Even though Azure Stevens, she's kind of been the one that's come on a little bit for the Sparks. I think the veterans, don't get caught up in the stats, have been a little bit disappointing. Maybe Plum and Hamby. Rakia Jackson has been erratic. Of course, they still don't have Cameron Brink back from injury. So the Sparks aren't a team I'm looking to really invest in very often on the WNBA board.
Yeah, Kelsey Plum's had a very down year. It hasn't clicked for a lot of Sparks. She's currently 16th in the players voting for All-Star. So that got lost in the shuffle of the voting for the players with Caitlin Clark 9th. Look, the production hasn't been there. The team's performance hasn't been there. I believe they only have 5 wins. So can I interest you, and I think I'm going to add this, in a money line parlay? New York, Minnesota, and Vegas, -109. So it's a way to bring down the Aces money line.
That would be the way I would have to attack it, because we were talking before the show. It's like, I kind of think the Aces are right here, but do I have anything to really pair him with? You don't really for a 2-teamer if you want to get as close to even money, at least as possible, other than the coin flip game, the Storm and the Dream, which I think is a coin flip for a reason. So I could sponsor that. But, now do I want to use the Aces and the Mercury? And which we're going to get to in a minute, and the Liberty instead of maybe using the Lynx. That might be the way I would go instead if I'm going to do that.
Okay, so I'm going to use those. I'm not going to use Phoenix, and we'll get to that game next. But I'm going to use New York and Minnesota. And in case you're we'll get to that. So I'm going to use that. It's -108. Bet Rivers a 3-leg parlay. So I'm going to also add that. I just wanted to get sort of more bang for my aces here because I do think it's the right side and they'll handle their business. Let's get to that aforementioned Mercury Wings game. So this game's in Dallas. Phoenix, an 11.5-point road favorite, as Arika Ogunbowale is ruled out here. So I think that might be a good thing for the Wings backers. I think this over-under's come up a little bit, so we could have a very up and down game. So they're going to run the offense through Paige Beckers. Now, Arike's there's no one who's more of a critic of hers than I am, but I do think, her presence on the wings and stuff like that. I mean, actual wings, physically, the wings on the perimeter, I think is better than who's ever going to be replacing her. So I just think you're going to, with the line going up, I actually think it's better if you're a better. I just don't know. I'm not ready to pull the trigger on Dallas, but it's a big number.
Yeah.
And I like Phoenix and all, but it's a lot of points for a home team, and I think they're going to be pretty sound running the offense through Paige.
Yeah, and I think this movement was a lot of because I think it might have been 2 days ago where they showed the Wings practice and they had like 6 healthy bodies out there. But keep in mind, there's a lot of transition on this Wings team. It's not just Arike being out. Now Nalissa Smith, of course, has been traded to Las Vegas, so you have some players that are going to be playing more minutes. I think Maddie Segrist, Maddie DeBatty, I think she is still out. But Tierra McCowan
out. Yeah.
Well, she's coming back. I think she and Giesel Soder are back from Eurobasket. So they're going to have to play more, which means how many minutes does Lee Giroux play now? Is that maybe a spot to go on her under points and or rebounds or a combination of both, because you got to think she's going to play less minutes than she was playing just with those two back with McCowan and company. Because I think Giroux, she played 34 against Atlanta, 30 against the Fever, and only played 19 against the Mystics over the weekend. So with these other two players back, and then how do you disperse Nalissa Smith's minutes now that she is gone? So I kind of don't want to get involved with the Wings, to be honest with you, even though this number is really high and probably even a little bit too high here, because I don't know how this new coach, because that's the thing with the Wings, he's still trying to figure it out, and we're almost close to halfway through the season, and now you trade one of your starters, and you still have, of course, Dejanay, and how these pieces all fit together. And I don't think they figured it out yet. And now it's become even harder here.
Well, you bring up good points because Maisha Hines-Allen is still listed as questionable, so we're not sure about her. They got Haley Jones as a free agent mid-season. She may have to start.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned Carrington. She's doubtful with a rib injury.
Yeah. She didn't practice the other day. So
I didn't realize. Phoebus is supposed to come back, by the way, for New York. Okay. I didn't realize this was so. Yeah, this is a really limited Dallas roster.
Yeah, and that's why you've seen such a big jump here. I don't know what to do with Dallas, because I think it's good for them long term, obviously, to have Paige, the offense run through her, and I think Paige has been really good. I think that she's kind of starting to find herself a little bit and starting to get at least a little bit more confidence. By the way, she did miss the last game where they beat the Mystics on Sunday, 79-71. So she is going to be back here. And of course, she was part of the all-star starters, and I think it's relatively deserved. Of course, she was going to get a ton of the fan votes because she's immensely popular in her own right. But you want to see, because this is a long-term deal for Dallas. I think we kind of knew Dallas was going to be more down than up this season, but you got to see what you have with your star, and it needs to go through her. So I think that that's good, at least long term for Dallas.
Can I interest you in a Wings team total under 76.5?
Let me take a look at that.
Push pace. They don't play defense, so that means they give up points quickly, and therefore the possession count is going to be high. But I don't know how they're going to score much.
But they're kind of a weird team. This has been, I think, one of the tougher teams for me to like get a handle on a night to night basis, because you know that they're not good. They're not one of the better teams, but they're very erratic, and I think part of that is because you have some pieces that don't quite fit together yet, and this is going to be a longer process. Kurt Miller, by the way, the former Sparks coach, the new GM for Dallas, and you got a first time coach, and he's trying to figure out what he wants to do. So the Wings are like the ultimate mystery team on a night to night basis. As inconsistent as so many teams are in the WNBA, the Wings, I think, really take the cake for me.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. So it's a lean for me on the team total under. Really curious to see how that plays out in terms of personnel. So anything that we touched on, I know here in the chat, somebody asked about Hamby over 14.5 points. Interesting question. We appreciate Adam Osimo always checking in with us. I like Hamby's game. I feel like the Sparks are a tough team to figure out their dispersion of points as well.
Yeah.
I like Hamby. I think we're going to get rebounds out of her, that we know. But she's always around the low to mid teens, so I don't see an edge there at all.
Thing about her with points too is she can be a little bit inconsistent from the foul line.
Oh yeah.
I've lost a prop or two over the last couple of years on her because of that. So I'm always a little gun shy on playing Hamby. And then, like you said, the disbursement of points with this team, because Plum is averaging over 20, but it feels like, a lot of the other aspects of her game have been down this season. And then, Rakia Jackson is kind of hit and miss. Azure Stevens has been a little bit more consistent lately, but they've had to switch that rotation around a little bit because they've had injuries, because they've had players with international obligations. So the Sparks and the Wings are kind of like two of the mystery teams for me, whereas it seems like the Sky, who are not in action tonight, are a little bit more, I guess, less of a mystery because Cardoso with the international obligations. So that's probably opened it up for Angel Reese. And Angel Reese, I think, has played better without her. So maybe finding some confidence. So I think the Sky are kind of getting their roles defined a little bit more. And we're talking about the bottom feeder teams in the league, of course, so far this season. I think the Sky are kind of starting to figure it out, and these other bottom feeders still have yet to do so.
Yeah, that's fair. Something we kicked around the other day. Let's get your hot take before we dive into the Chicago, or before I was in the NBA. Chicago 15-1 plus 1,500 at Bet Rivers to make the playoffs. Any interest there if small ball kicks in and they go on a run?
I don't know if I'm going to play that as of yet, but we pointed that out the other day.
Was you and I? Okay.
Yeah, where it's kind of like, it seems like they've been playing at least a little bit better. Like they've been more competitive in games. Of course, the win at the Sparks, they were competitive down the stretch. We're in it right until the final couple minutes against the Valkyries, and then beat the Sparks the game before. So I want to see them do that. I want to see maybe some more positive performances against some of the better teams, because I feel like they've beaten their fellow, poor teams. They've beaten the Sparks. They've beaten Connecticut. So I want to see that at least against the middle echelon and maybe against some of even the top teams. And you haven't seen that yet out of the Sky, but I do think Reese has been playing better. They're starting to get Ariel Atkins a little bit more involved in the offense, which is what really baffled me early, because you gave up like the top 3 pick for her basically in a trade. And it's like, you weren't using her. You weren't giving her enough minutes here, especially with the Vandersloot injury. So now Atkins is becoming a little bit more of a force offensively. Angel Reese seemingly has some confidence, had a great game against the Sparks on Sunday. So maybe they're turning a corner, but it's piqued my interest, but I still want to see, because I want to see them before I'm a believer. Are they at least competitive with the better teams in the league? Are they competitive with the Liberty? Are they competitive with the Storm or the Dream or the Aces? Hell, even the Fever. The Fever like dominate this team, so I want to see them be competitive against more of these teams.
All right, fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, let's shift gears to the NBA. It's been relatively quiet the last 24 hours, although the Lakers did officially add DeAndre Ayton for $8 million, 2-year deal. I believe a player option the second year. Not a ton of movement in the odds. The Nuggets adding more and more role players, getting sort of deeper and less financially restricted outside of Jokic. They're the co-second favorite in the West with the Rockets at 5-1. So Houston's may add some nice pieces with Finney Smith and on top of Durant, of course. So you have definitely like a second tier in the West below the Thunders. It's Nuggets and Rockets. And then the next tier, Lakers, T-Wolves, Warriors, Spurs, Clippers. Anything interesting? I know there's been some buzz on this show with the Mavs. We all like the Mavs in terms of the price, and they're going to be sneaky solid next year. Anything jump out to you with these free agency developments?
Well, I'll go to the Nuggets first, who I think have gotten widely praised for these moves, and I think they have been good moves. They're a lot deeper than they certainly were. I think depth was really an issue for this team in the playoffs, and they look a lot deeper now. They add Jonas Valanciunas. I think getting Bruce Brown back, who was kind of like a culture guy on that championship team, and certainly a good defender. Not a guy you necessarily need offensively, but I think that Bruce Brown move was also very good, getting Cameron Johnson another score. And some of those young guys did show a little bit of something. They just don't get the consistent clock as of yet. Like you saw some nice appearances from Julian Strother and from Peyton Watson and those guys. So I think this Denver team, being that, Jokic and Murray, not that they're ancient, but they got some miles on them and have played a lot of playoff games and a lot of deep playoff runs. So you need some guys off the bench there in Denver. So I like what they did, probably most of any team in the Western Conference. Lakers do get Ayton. He takes the discount, did not take more money with the Indiana Pacers. So he takes that with the Lakers, and they finally got their big guy. But that's a team that I still think stinks defensively. And I'm not ready to buy in on the Lakers necessarily yet. And the market, you're never going to get that true accurate price, I think, on the Lakers in the future market because they're so popular.
I agree. But I don't think odds makers are really worried about them. I mean, there's more buzz on LeBron asking for a trade and things like that. They got limitations defensively. I tweeted yesterday they could add prime Gary Payton and Tony Allen on the perimeter on defense, and they would still be a huge defensive issues because Luka ain't playing D. Ayton doesn't play much. LeBron can only do so much. So they got some deficiencies for sure, especially if you add Austin Reeves. But we'll see. Lakers, LeBron has a way of making role players look really good, and that's something. Anything in the East I can interest you in?
Well, we talked about it the other day, and it's been cut a little bit, but they're still kind of down there, toward like the 6th or 7th or 8th choice. Philadelphia 76ers to me. And I realize that's a little bit of a leap of faith considering we don't have a lot of a sample size with Paul George and Embiid and Maxey together. But I think they've got some depth on this team, and they're the team that's being ignored. And we mentioned about the Magic, who I think are the third choice at Bet Rivers now at 4-1. They've been overbought to me. And I think that Desmond Bain certainly fits a need for three-point shooting, which they were highly deficient. They were, I think, bottom of the league in three-pointers made and three-point shooting in general. I don't think that should make them 4-1 in the East, in an East that's still very, very wide open. We've seen a little buzz on the Hawks. The Hawks, I think, have been cut to like 9-1, where they're the fourth choice. They're even ahead of Boston right now, and ahead of Detroit, who everybody kind of sees as that young up and comer. And then, of course, we get to like the 8-9 spot where the Bucks. I don't think this Turner deal really made much of a dent for the Bucks, to me personally. I kind of, you're basically paying Miles Turner $50 million a year when you account for Dame's cap space, or the dead cap stuff for Damian Lillard. So I don't know if it really made the Bucks better. It weakened a rival with the Pacers because now they're out to 28-1 in the East. And it doesn't look like, at least based on the rumors that they're going to be signing another center. They were certainly involved, I think, in DeAndre Ayton. They had him to the offer sheet a couple years ago when he was still in Phoenix. But yeah, I don't know. It's not great for the Pacers to let a guy walk for nothing, but I don't disagree with them not overpaying for Miles Turner and going into the luxury tax when you've got Tyrese Halliburton on the shelf for the entire next season.
Okay. They're rivals. So I mentioned that, last, like, they are bitter rivals right now, the Pacers and the Bucks, interdivision. They have a history. So it's a little bit of a coup in that regard. But the number one question is, does Giannis care? If this keeps Giannis there, then maybe it's worth it. Other than that, because that was the whole reason they did it, right? To appease Giannis, win him over, saying, hey, we're willing to do this. But what that also means is you're willing to hurt your ability in the future to get free agents and things like that. Like you mentioned, there's dead cap hit that this does. So it's a stretch provision, basically. So it's a reckless move. And I don't know if it's going to win him over. It might actually push him away. Time will tell. But I don't see it. I think the only two futures I would make would be Pistons plus 1150, because I expect them to take a big step forward. And they were right there in the playoffs, as good as anyone. And they've added some nice pieces. They got Duncan Robinson to fill the Beasley hole pending his gambling stuff going on. And they're a team that's really a lot to like. And I think Cunningham could take another giant step forward. He's that good.
And they get Ivy back.
Yeah, exactly. Jaden Ivey, who's a total stud. So I think there's a lot to like with Detroit. And I agree with you. They should not be the same price as Boston. I think Boston price has a lot of unknown. But in terms of, like, how Steven's going to do it, maybe the trade deadline, stuff like that. I understand the wishy-washiness of the odds of Celtics. We don't know if they're going to go full tank or what. So I understand that in-between stuff. But the Eastern odds, I mean, the Bucks and Pacers being what they are, I mean, Pacers 28-1, I get it. But who knows?
Yeah, and on the Pistons side, too, you mentioned Robinson, some of that shooting ability. And then they added Karis LeVert, who I think is a nice veteran for a really young backcourt. You look at the age of these guys: Cade Cunningham, 23, Jaden Ivey, just 23, Marcus Sasser, 24, Asar Thompson, 22. These are a lot of really young players. Ronald Holland at 19. So adding that veteran presence and then adding some shooting. Robinson, Chaz Lanier from Tennessee. We'll see if that second rounder makes the club. He can fill it up. If you run him off screens, he can hit some threes. So that's where I think the Pistons were really deficient. If you saw them in that Knicks series, where I thought they outplayed the Knicks in a lot of that series, but just couldn't hit outside shots with any regularity.
Yeah. I mean, look, the Pistons probably are a year or two away, but the odds are nice. So it's not something I pulled the trigger on, but it's the only thing I would consider as of now. All right, that's going to do it for this show. Like I mentioned earlier, no fast break show tomorrow. We will have Betting Weekly Hardball. It'll be Adam the Bull and I for that one. And 5-game WNBA slate. So continue to subscribe to the newsletter, bettingweeklystudios.com. There's a lot of good stuff in there. And please like and subscribe to the podcast, because that's how you get alerts of when we are on. So that's important. And it also really helps us. And we appreciate everyone doing that to help us. I echo what Petey says here in the comments section. Enjoy the 4th. And so I want everyone doing that who's watching the show from here in the States. But we will have a show for baseball tomorrow, Betting Weekly Hardball. That's at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. But that's going to do it for this show. For Wes Reynolds and everyone behind the scenes who really does the heavy lifting, making us look good, I'm Doug Kezirian. We'll see you back here for Betting Weekly Fast Break after the weekend, Monday, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific.